Facilities that make this program possible are provided by the City of Highland Park. Programs are produced independently by members of the community. The City of Highland Park is not affiliated with the following program or the producers of public access programming and is not responsible for the content. The following program does not reflect the opinions of the City of Highland Park.
Hello and welcome to Chill Out. I'm Pam Chill, one of the Highland Park senior producers, and I'm very excited today to have on as my guest Corey McVeigh. Welcome, Corey, to the program. Thank you so much for appearing. And I'm going to give a brief bio on you. You are an RN, BSN, and your official title is the Director of Nursing for Passport Health Medicine. You joined Dr. Morcott in 2005 after spending most of your career as an emergency room nurse. You are responsible for the day-to-day operations in clinical excellence and growth of Passport Health of Wisconsin. You have great pride and you're knowledgeable, personable, and you're service-oriented, and you do compliment your staff, and despite great distances from each other, I think there's Chicago and a Wisconsin branch.
Correct.
Right, that you work extremely well together as a team. And you did say on your bio that your other time, Corey, is spent with your wife on your farm in southern Wisconsin, where you grow, make, and sell artwork and organic produce. And you're also proud caretakers of many chickens and rabbits.
That's correct.
Okay, well, that's a lot to handle. All righty. And tell me a little bit about travel medicine.
First of all, thank you for having us on the show. I've been
My pleasure.
quite excited
Yes.
to chill out with Pam. So this is a nice opportunity for us. We are a local business based largely out of Vernon Hills, but we're, like you mentioned, we are from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, all the way down to Mokina, Illinois. I think we're now going to have 5 offices just in Chicago alone. So we are growing and expanding. Travel medicine is a lesser known part of medicine, but more people should know about it. So basically, the CDC and the World Health Organization puts together diseases that you could be at risk for when you're traveling to specific countries. And that information we use to counsel patients who are traveling to these areas. We can give them the recommended vaccines. We explain everything on why it's recommended and if it fits in their own personal health profile and their risk. And so we provide the vaccines, medications for things like malaria, altitude sickness, diarrhea, which happens to be the #1 ailment of all travelers. And we do that within a 45-minute to an hour consultation with one of our travel health specialists. And our travel health specialists are typically nurses or physician's assistant.
Now, is this ever covered by insurance? Is that here, is it?
So that's kind of a sticky thing. I can't answer a specific yes or no. It does depend on insurance. As you know, there's thousands of insurances out there. Travel medicine specifically is typically not covered by insurance. I would say probably 99% of the time. They'd rather you stay domestically and not take the risk of traveling overseas. But many of the vaccines that are recommended for the countries that you're traveling to are also indicated in the United States. So, for instance, hepatitis A, which is a disease of the liver that you get from contaminated food and water, that's not indicated just because you're going to an exotic country. It's also indicated in the United States. So if your insurance covers vaccines that are indicated in the United States, your insurance will probably cover that vaccine.
Okay.
And then medications, it depends on your pharmacy, whatever your pharmacy coverage is.
Is it best
insurance.
to, of course, bring your own medication as opposed to running out of medication?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, for your own personal medications, they suggest that you get take with you at least a couple weeks more in case that you have layovers or your bags get lost. Make sure you have your own medications in your own luggage as well as your carry-on, so you have that coverage. But specialty medications such as malaria, we definitely recommend getting here in the United States, one, that are FDA approved, and two, that you know you have the right stuff for what your specific, there's different malaria medications that some work in some countries and not in others, so you want to make sure you have the correct one. Plus, I remember about 5 years ago, 3 guys in New Jersey got busted for selling counterfeit malaria medications in other countries in the world. So there's a high rate of counterfeit malaria medications in other countries.
So you absolutely want to get
You want to make sure you're getting the right
FDA
medication.
approved and licensed. Yes.
Correct.
Okay. I think we discussed a little bit, why should one seek a free travel medical consultation? So in order to, as a precautionary measure.
Correct. And a lot of people don't know exactly, you don't know what you don't know. So coming to us, we can tell you what are your disease risks when you're in these particular countries. And we're not all doom and gloom. We want you to be educated and offer you the measures to help prevent getting these diseases. Being sick on vacation is not fun at all. Being sick is not being fun, but when you're not home, it's even worse. So there's plenty of measures and things that you could come across in your travels, and we're here to help you figure out what those are to your specific destination. And it's not just diseases, it could also be safety issues, political stuff that's going on in those particular countries. So droughts, famines, emerging diseases. You know, we were talking about Zika a couple weeks before the media was, because we were right on top of this. So things like that.
Okay. Does Zika still pose a problem as
It
far
does.
as risk?
Yeah, it definitely does.
Okay.
Yeah, especially in your South American countries. And there's a lot of travelers to Brazil. It's a great country to visit. But
I know. I've been there. It's a phenomenal country. It's beautiful. Quite memorable. What is a travel medical specialist? Would it be you, or would it be, what kind of degrees or knowledge or experience would they have?
So baseline would be either an RN or an MD, can also be a travel medicine specialist, and physician's assistants, could be a nurse practitioner. So all of them are able to give vaccines under protocol and suggestion by the Centers for Disease Control and the World Health Organization. But the specifics is in the training. So knowing how to find the information that's recommended, which vaccines, knowing about the vaccine, side effects, being able to cross-reference them with the individual patient's health issues, medications, etc. So all that comes in training.
Okay, so one obviously plans their trip. I'm just going to go over the itinerary step by step. So whether you plan your trip on your own or you plan it through a travel agent, you're going to an exotic country or series of other countries. So they all have may need necessary visas, they may need, precautionary measures, inoculations in order to get your visas. So, walk me through a little bit the process.
Of the process of the consultation with us?
Let's just assume, let's say and I call you up and I go, I'm going to India.
Okay, wonderful.
Okay.
India is definitely our #1 destination. There's a lot of business travel to India, and then a lot of people going to study yoga, and it's an ancient country, so
and we
there's
have
a lot of history there.
I just want to say we have, the very larger metropolitan areas, and we also, you might be going on a smaller, excursion somewhere else, so would your needs be different?
Correct, and your needs are very different for the business traveler who is going to be in hotel rooms and meeting rooms, as opposed to somebody who is going to be doing mission work out in the slums, versus somebody who's going to be out in the wilderness looking at exotic animals. So each of those individual characteristics of what that trip is, that we will steer the consultation to you. If you'd like
Okay.
to show the
yes,
book,
I just
everybody.
wanted to say, this is a very lovely brochure that here I am, and it has my name on it, and I'm traveling to India.
You are.
So this is if I were, and someday I'd love to. I really would. Okay,
So every traveler gets one of these books. We print them out that day or the day before, so it's the information is completely up to date for the country that you're going to. So it'll have malaria recommendations for the country, the areas that you're going to. If it depends on altitude, all that will be covered in there. So, for instance, malaria isn't just if you're going to this country, you need malaria meds. It depends on where you're going to be in that country, what you're going to be doing. And that's the case for a lot of these vaccines. So it'll start with the malaria information, then it will go into all the other recommended vaccines, has explanations in there on why you need it, who needs it specifically, what your risks are for that disease and why you need the vaccine. Then it will go into stuff on the weather, and there's if there's any health alerts for that particular country. We even include State Department information, so when you're there, you actually have all of the contact information for the local embassies and consulates in that country, and a lot of times they have places where you can find out about getting medical care if you get sick while you're there, or any information at all. As an American citizen, you have access to that. So all that is in there, as well as what's their health care like there, what's travel like there, how do they treat women, cultural stuff, do you look people in the eyes, do you take off your shoes when you go into their house, all kinds of stuff like that.
that is
Pretty
quite
comprehensive book.
amazing. Yes, it's a very comprehensive, kind of like 101 on going there that, you have a lot of detailed information
Yes.
that's already been researched, which is really good. Okay, now what if I have had all my childhood immunizations? Am I still at risk, and what would I need, or would that depend on where I'm going?
So it would depend on where you're going, and there are some childhood vaccines that are good for life, and there are some vaccines that you need a booster to, depending on what risks you're going to be in when you're on this trip. And then there are some vaccines that you've probably never had because they didn't exist when we were kids. So now you need to get those updated. So we're not only making the recommendations for diseases that you're going to be in contact when you're in those countries, but also to get you caught up for what you need in the U.S. as well.
Okay. Now, on what diseases do they have, other countries have, that we don't? Like, what are, like, the top 5 countries that people would go to that they would be, their health would be compromised in some way?
Well, actually, every country in the world has recommendations of vaccines that you need for where you're going. But I'll say countries like Canada, Europe, Japan, Australia, industrialized countries like the United States have the same infrastructure and sewage and public health laws that we do. They vaccinate their population, so the disease spread is a lot less. It's when you get into kind of your non-industrialized nations or areas of industrialized non-industrialized nations where you are at risk. So most of Africa, South America, Central America, Southeast Asia, even remote areas of Vietnam, places in Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, and these are major destinations these days that people are going to, and they're not even aware that there's diseases there that we don't have here that they've never been vaccinated against. So Japanese encephalitis, although not much of it in Japan, it's in most of your Asian countries, especially if you're going to be, backpacking and you're out in rural forested areas, or you're going to be in that country for a long time. So these are things that you would talk about specifically with your travel health specialist. And then there's yellow fever, which if we mentioned Brazil. Brazil, we're starting to see yellow fever in areas of Brazil that we have not. Yellow fever hasn't existed before. And all of a sudden, within the past month, we're starting to see it in areas where we haven't seen it before. So you may not have been vaccinated for yellow fever for your trip to Rio de Janeiro 2 months ago, But now it's recommended that you get a yellow fever shot before you go there now.
When I went there, it was going back about 35 years, you didn't need any vaccinations. You did need a visa, of course, but not vaccinations for that.
So there's a big difference between recommended and required.
That's what I wanted
So
to go
along
into,
that
right.
line, Brazil has no required vaccines. So the only required vaccine anywhere in the world is yellow fever, and that's for countries that say, hey, you can't come into our country unless you have a yellow fever vaccine. And that is determined by those individual countries, along with the World Health Organization. There are other countries that don't require yellow fever vaccine, such as Brazil and many African countries, but it's definitely recommended to get the yellow fever vaccine before you go there to protect yourself.
Okay. And of course, when you apply for the visa, they tell you what is required.
Yes,
Oh, no.
provided you are applying for your visa in enough time.
Oh, okay.
Because like yellow fever,
Well, some people
it takes
haven't-
about 10 days for a yellow fever vaccine to work.
Some people do have emergency travel. They have a relative, or they have a special business meeting, or whatever.
Correct.
Their time frame is. Now, what if you have a medical condition or like an autoimmune disease that you're really not a good candidate for immunizations? What happens then? What is the process?
Okay, so most vaccines are indicated for people who are immunocompromised because vaccines elicit an immune response to diseases, so it's good for you to have that protection. There are some vaccines that are live vaccines. Those are not indicated for people who have a weakened immune system due to, like you said, autoimmune disease. Then they would need, say, for instance, if a country requires that you have yellow fever vaccine. Yellow fever vaccine is a live vaccine, okay? We would write you a medical waiver because you are immunocompromised, and that letter is as good as getting the shot. So they will still let you in the country with that medical waiver.
Okay, I understand that. Now, what countries you were talking about countries, like what countries specifically do you need shots for?
There are many African countries and many South American countries that have the requirements. And then there's even more countries that have that yellow fever requirement if you're coming from a country that has yellow fever disease into their country.
Oh, that's interesting.
Right, they're protecting their citizens.
They're protecting their citizens of their country, right? Because they don't know
Because
what you're carrying.
the yellow fever disease is spread by a mosquito biting you, getting the disease from you, and then biting somebody else, and then spreading it to them.
Okay. Is there a shot for every type of disease almost? Or
Unfortunately, no.
No.
There's some very debilitating diseases like dengue and chikungunya. Zika is in the news now.
Right.
No
There's
vaccines
no
for
vaccine
these.
for
No
Zika,
vaccines
right.
for any of these. They're always being worked on. They're always in different stages of development. There's a dengue vaccine that's being used in some Central and South American countries right now. Not FDA approved at this point, but they're being vetted by the World Health Organization at this point. So there's always hope.
Oh, yes, absolutely. They're always working on research, yes. Now, what potential side effects can you get from the immunizations?
So
Like benefit versus risk.
Right, and so risk would mainly be in those immunocompromised people, especially with the live vaccine. So we would avoid that specifically, even if your risk of getting the disease is high. So you have to balance out what is my risk of getting the disease versus the side effects from the immunizations. So this is one of my favorite questions because really soreness at the injection site is the #1 complaint from vaccines. Some people feel a little bit under the weather for a couple of days after getting vaccines. That's when your body is building up those antibodies to fight that disease. And it's usually no worse than that feeling you get when you go, I wonder if I'm getting a cold. Now, of course, there are people that do feel like they get sick from vaccines. That is a possibility, but it's pretty rare. So if you think about every school-age child gets their vaccines, everybody in every branch of our military gets vaccines. Vaccines work, and it's pretty rare to have adverse problems from vaccines.
Okay. Are there any medications that one should bring? I know we talked about your own medications, but are there things like just over the counter that you should bring?
Sure, I think it's a good idea, especially with counterfeit medications in other places, that you have your own, whatever you like for your headaches, whether that be acetaminophen or ibuprofen. What do you like for upset stomach? You can always bring
Especially diarrhea medication.
Well, diarrhea medication, actually, that's treated, if you treat that with Imodium or Pepto-Bismol, that's just stopping the symptoms. That's
Right.
not, there's no cure there. So we do have some options for cure. One's called Diet Rescue, which is a new product that we've been promoting that's working really well. And if that doesn't work, then antibiotics. And there's very specific antibiotics for specific areas of the world because because of our overuse of antibiotics in the world, there's become drug-resistant traveler's diarrhea in areas. So again, that's why going to a travel medicine specialist makes a lot of sense, because then they'll know what can be used in different parts of the world. So, but I would also take, if you have contact solution that you need, make sure you're taking that. Any medications you look in
because of the sterile effect too, because you may not want to buy contact lens solution there because you don't know how sterile that if it's made within that country. Because how many of these countries actually are buying the U.S. products, or are they just having their own manufacturing?
Well, most generic medications are not made in the United States, so they are getting them from other countries. So it's hard for us to know exactly. We know that the ones that are sold here in the United States have gone through the vetting process with the FDA, and they're approved and work, and so we would much rather you get all your stuff here. CDC actually has a great list of, if you're taking a first aid kit with your medications, here's a list of what we recommend that you take. And we actually have those ready-made and purchasable in our clinics.
Oh.
So we're a one-stop shop. We've got your vaccines, we've got your medications, we've got your first aid kits, your insect repellents, all ready for you in the office.
Insect repellents, yes.
Insect repellents you're going to need for your malaria, and like I said, with dengue and chikungunya that don't necessarily have vaccines that we can give at this point, and Zika. There's a lot of diseases out there that the only way to prevent is not to get bit by the mosquitoes. So we have good mosquito protection for your clothes and for your skin.
So do you actually have to spray the whole clothes as well?
Yep.
Oh, okay. And how about nets at night? Does it depend?
Depending if you're not staying in an air-conditioned hotel, it is recommended that you sleep under a treated bed net.
And where would you get that? Like a home, like a camping
Usually your camping
place?
places. Yep.
Camping places would have that.
Yep.
And what other services you mentioned briefly do you provide from Passport?
So we do have besides the vaccine services, we also in flu season we actually do come on site to businesses and provide flu shots to employers, or from the employers to the employees, and we do thousands of those every year in the Chicago area. We also do wellness screenings, so we can come in and do your cholesterol and your BMI and basic health screenings that a lot of insurance companies do want you to have on a yearly basis. We can come in and do those. And we also have a visa service as well. So we do visa expediting as well. So
that's good to know. Okay.
We have specialists that do just that.
Really?
Yep.
Okay, so if emergency travel or their passport got lost in the mail and then suddenly, does that happen? They say with your passports you should always send it certified, return, requested, signed for.
Trackable. Exactly.
Okay, or documentation to it. Okay, and going back to just what are your most popular travel destinations that you're finding?
India for sure, mainly because of business travel.
Business, yes.
Brazil is big. China, again, with business. But I think the number one increased destination in the past year, maybe two, it has been that whole Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos,
I see there
Thailand.
are a lot of cruises going there as well.
And it seems these days, if you're in your 20s, you have to go to Thailand. It just seems like everybody in their 20s is making a trip to Thailand. It's been a major destination.
Food, or is it
It's cheap.
Oh.
They have great beaches. There's a lot of other 20-somethings there. It's cheap to get there. It's cheap to stay there. Wonderful beaches, wonderful food. And I've had people that are going 2 and 3 and 4 times. They absolutely love going there.
Have they had any problems? Have they encountered any difficulties?
If you
or
come to us and
illnesses?
you're educated and you're taking the right precautions, it's pretty mild.
Now, what about you see like safaris? I'm talking like photograph safaris, not hunting safaris.
No, we see both. Yeah, I mean, if you're traveling for whatever reason, we'll see you. We want you to be protected for your destination. But yeah, safaris have definitely gone up, especially since the recession. Those really fell off during the recession.
They're very costly trips.
Very costly, and people definitely don't want to get sick on those trips, especially when you're staying out.
Because you're so far away from any civilized, quote unquote, hospital medicine and whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
And what do you recommend if someone does get sick on the trip and they're so far from, a hospital?
Sure. So we always recommend that people get a travel medical insurance.
Okay, excellent.
They're really
idea.
cheap, and some of them have a little bit of coverage, some have coverage as far as some of them actually have hospitals located throughout the world, so they'll pick you up and take you to their closest hospital.
So they would actually airlift you.
Yep. Or get you there however they can. And others say, well, yeah, go get care and we'll reimburse you later. So it really makes a lot of sense to do your research. And then, of course, when you're in our consultation, we have recommendations of ones that we know that do a really good job.
Well, that's very good to to do that. As far as should you bring a lot of just say an emergency happens, how would you be paying for that if they say they'll reimburse you afterwards? So you'll be putting on your credit card?
It depends on where you're going to be. I've heard a lot of people say that credit cards are no good in the countries that in some areas of the countries that they go to.
Because they
cash
can't
is king.
process it. They can't process it too. So you have to convert your money to their currency.
And a lot of places will take the American dollar.
Oh, okay.
That's worth
but
a lot.
healthcare is going to be a lot less.
It is.
Than it is in the States.
Right.
So.
But we also don't know how good it's going to be in the area that you're going to. So having that travel medical insurance as a backup is really a good thing to have.
Just say, worst case scenario, something happens. How can you tell if you're getting, higher quality health care? How can you tell what precautions are being made?
Right, it's really...
God forbid you have an accident, whatever, and you need you have a broken arm, broken leg, or you need an emergency appendectomy, just something happened.
Right, it's, are the medical people doing proper, are they wearing gloves? Are they washing their hands? Are they, and I've done mission work in Nigeria where the hospital didn't even have running water.
Nice.
So, and sometimes we had electricity. So it really, it depends on where you're going. That's why you really need to be educated about where you're going, what your situation's going to be like when you're there, and have that backup travel medical insurance, but also getting a hold of the embassy as well. They can tell you where are the good places to go. I would call them and say to them, where do you get your medications for this? Where do you go get your sore throat treated? Where do you go if you get a stomach ache?
Go by the embassy recommendations as opposed to somebody else, because somebody else may be recommending, a relative of theirs.
Yeah, right.
Right, and you want to know that, what meets U.S. standards, which they would know in that. Yes, absolutely. So what's the biggest thing, if you could say one thing that you should watch out for when you're traveling to a foreign country, what would that be?
Contaminated food and water. So you want to make sure the bottled water that you get, you're the one breaking the seal, or your water has been boiled, or filtered if you know the filter's being maintained.
And to know the source of your water, right? Like if you're getting a big, gallon of water, you want to know where that water came from.
Exactly, right. And we do have, you can get a pocket UV treatment for your water that kills everything in the water in 90 seconds.
There you go, pocket UV treatment. That's actually the
so
quote of the day.
So there's all kinds of options.
Thank you so much, Corey McVeigh, for being on the program today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And all about travel medicine. So, height of the travel season, so go out there and travel.
Yes, come see us before you go.
Yes, absolutely.